Emily, and I'm going to show you how to make this magical Disney cake with Cinderella's castle, complete with fireworks. I've made 3 confetti cakes for this cake, and I'm levelling them by cutting off the domed top of each one. Then I'm dividing each cake in half horizontally with a serrated knife to turn it into 2 layers, so my cake will have 6 layers. The cake looks really fun on the inside, with these bright pops of colour. I've made a batch of chocolate ganache, and I'm adding a few drops of black gel food colour. You don't need a lot because the ganache is already so dark. I've put the links to the recipes for the cake and the ganache in the description below. When the ganache has come to room temperature, I'm frosting my cake. I've layered my cake with blue vanilla buttercream and chilled it so it's less crumbly when I frost it. The ganache is wonderfully silky smooth, so it's really easy to spread onto the cake with my offset spatula and isn't pulling off any crumbs. So I'm not bothering with a crumb coat, I'm just doing one thick layer of frosting. Since the cake is cold, the ganache is setting quickly and that makes it even easier to smooth the frosting. This is a bench scraper and it's an extra tall one because my cake is so tall and I want it to go all the way up to the top. I'm chilling the cake while I prepare the castle. I'm using this photo I found online as a guide of how the castle looks at night, and I've printed out a line drawing to trace over. I'm colouring in the blue parts while I look at the photo of the castle, and then shading the building in with 2 shades of grey. This makes it easier when I pipe onto the drawing. If you're enjoying this tutorial, please click the thumbs up button. I'm taping parchment paper over the drawing, lining up the bottom of the parchment paper with the bottom of the sketch to make it easier to apply to the cake later. I've got it on a cutting board to make it easier to move around. I've mixed my buttercream with gel food colours to make 2 shades of grey and 2 shades of blue, although in the end I'm only going to use one of the blues. I've added about a teaspoon of cream to each bowl to make the frosting more liquid, and this consistency will be easier to pipe. This is a disposable piping bag, and I'm snipping off a tiny bit of the tip, just enough to be able to pipe out of it. You can do a practice run around your bowl to check the size of the hole. If the frosting wiggles around as you pipe it, the hole is too small, so you need to snip off a bit more. To pipe on the castle, I'm outlining each section of this shade of grey, and then filling it in, and then using a little offset spatula to smooth it out. My hands are very shaky naturally, and they're even worse because I drink far too much coffee, so some of my lines are a bit wobbly, and I'm using the side of the spatula blade to straighten them up. When I finish all of the sections that'll be this colour, I'm chilling the picture in the freezer for a few minutes while I get the next piping bag ready with my next shade of grey. Now I'm continuing with the darker grey, filling in those sections. It's important to chill the first colour because you won't smudge it with this next colour. Chilling again for about 5 minutes in the freezer and then piping on the blue roofs. The tips are very narrow and pointed, so a toothpick is useful to shape the frosting. You want the thickness of the castle to be pretty consistent so that it sits flat against the cake. This side that you see here is going to be the back of the picture. I'm spreading the frosting with my spatula to level it out so it's all the same thickness. Because the surface of the cake is curved, this castle needs to wrap around it, and if it's cold, it will probably crack. So I'm going to leave it out to come to room temperature before applying it to the cake. Meanwhile, we're going to make some fireworks. This is messy, so use scrap paper or disposable tablecloths or newspaper. Does anyone even have paper newspapers anymore? Well, use something to protect your walls and table and countertop. This is Wilton white icing, and I'm thinning it out with clear alcohol. I'm using Martini because it's been sitting in the liquor cabinet forever because no one likes it. You want it to be thin enough that it drips off the paintbrush when you lift it up. Now we're going to splatter the cake. You can play around with this to get the effect you want. I like to tap the paintbrush against my finger to spray the cake because you have a bit of control over where the paint goes. If you have a lot of paint on the brush, you'll leave a splatter on the cake, or if there's just a little bit, you'll leave a fine spray. You can also strike the paintbrush like it's a wand casting a spell, or a conductor's baton, flicking it and then snapping your wrist back to stop it from hitting the cake. I'm adding a bit of blue to make some coloured fireworks, and then splattering on some more fireworks. Have fun with this, it's a good excuse to be creative and messy. I'm adding a bit more blue to make the next fireworks a bit darker and brighter. Tidying up the cake board with a paper towel, and then washing my hands before they get too stained. Now the chilled parts of my castle have come back to room temperature, so I'm lifting the parchment paper off the drawing and holding it up against the side of the cake, with the bottom of the parchment paper against the base of the cake. I'm pressing gently because I don't want to squeeze the castle details out of shape, but you need a decent amount of pressure to get it to stick. Now I'm peeling it back slowly, and there's the beginning of my castle. You can see a few patches where the frosting stuck to the parchment instead of the cake, and those are easy to touch up with a bit of frosting, smoothing it with a spatula, or touching it up with a toothpick. I'll come back to this castle in a minute. I'm finishing off the top of my cake with black swirls of ganache, piping it on with a 1M star tip in my piping bag, and wiggling the bag from side to side as I pipe, counting to 3 for each one so they're all the same height. Some edible silver glitter, and now back to my castle to do some shading. I'm mixing Wilton white icing with just a drop of black gel food colour and adding some clear alcohol to thin it out. Now I'm shading in the left side of each dark grey turret, creating some shadows from the floodlights, but also making it clearer where each turret ends and the next one begins. Once most of the colour is off my brush, I'm going back and smudging each line to make more realistic shadows, and then going down the left of every light grey turret and doing the same, and with less paint on the brush, the shadows on these turrets come out lighter. And there it is! If you've enjoyed this tutorial, please click the thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel for new cake decorating tutorials every week.